Today's lesson is introvert or extrovert. Which one are you? Hi, everybody. I'm Roger.
And I'm Sam.
And the topic for today's lesson is about being introverted or extroverted, which means are you kind of shy and quiet, or are you outgoing and gregarious? Do you like to hang out with other people, or do you like to spend more time with yourself or by yourself? And yes, we're asking the question, which one are you? I guess these are personality types.
Yes, and I don't know if this is such a thing in Taiwan, but I can remember growing up, we did many personality tests in school, and they were always trying to kind of figure out, or I guess help you figure out, were you more of an introvert? Were you more of an extrovert? Were you perceptive? And just all these different things. And I never really got what was the point of it, but now that I'm older, I kind of understand that knowing more about how you respond to other people and where you kind of get your energy and get energized from is actually pretty helpful.
It is helpful indeed, and to me, in any case, it seems like most people are extroverts, but I might be surprised at how many introverts there actually are out there in the world. So indeed, these are personality types, and they have their advantages and disadvantages, which we're going to talk about in the next couple of days. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's listen to the first part of our lesson, and we'll be right back to discuss it.
Introvert or extrovert? Which one are you? How we interact with the world varies from person to person, or personality to personality, if you will. In general, when we talk about personality types, we can put people into one of two groups, introverts and extroverts. These terms describe how people gain energy, socialize, and approach challenges.
大家好，第一部分介绍动词 interact， 它的意思是互动、相互交流。例如 Fiona is a good salesperson because she likes interacting with people. Fiona 是个很好的业务员，因为她喜欢与人互动。或者 Charlie feels uncomfortable when he has to interact with strangers. 当 Charlie 必须与陌生人互动时，他会感到不自在。另外补充这个字的名词 interaction。INTERACTION, interaction. 造个例句 Social interactions help people build strong relationships. 社交互动有助于人们建立稳固的关系。再造一句 At the meeting, we'll discuss ways to improve our interactions with customers. 在会议上，我们将讨论改善与客户互动的方法。再来看到动词 socialize， 表示参加社交活动、交际。例如I enjoy going out and socializing with friends after work. 下班后，我喜欢外出与朋友社交。或是 Betty socialized with her classmates on the weekend. Betty 周末与同学社交。
Okay, so again, an introvert is a person who is kind of turned inward. They like to spend time by themselves. They approach things that way. They don't like big crowds or big parties and things like that. And an extrovert, of course, is the opposite. They like to have lots of friends. They like to have lots of conversations with people. They're very active. They're very outgoing. And indeed, these are different kinds of personality types. I could ask you what kind of personality type you are, Sam, but we've got a discussion starter in our program tomorrow, so we'll wait to answer that question then. But we're asking our dear listeners, which one are you? Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Yes, and so we will jump right into the article, and it says, how we interact with the world varies from person to person, or personality to personality, if you will. And we have this word interact. This word interact just basically means how you get along with, talk, communicate with somebody else. Sometimes we can use this as the noun form. The interactions between you and another person is how you communicate, talk, listen, whatever. And so introverts and extroverts will interact with the world versus the entire world and different things like that. They will act differently and they will interact differently. And so we also had this little phrase, if you will, is basically like saying, if you will accept this other phrasing, not just person to person, but would you accept if I said personality to personality? So if you use this phrase, Basically, you've just offered another way to describe something or a little bit more information to kind of give you a better picture of what you are talking about.
Indeed. So, yes, it varies from person to person, or as another explanation, personality to personality, if you will. That's another way we can explain this. And in general, when we talk about personality types, we can put people into one of two groups, introverts and extroverts. I think psychologists have many other ways to divide people into different sorts of categories, but the main two categories are introverts and extroverts, people who are outgoing and those who are not so outgoing.
And so it says these terms, introvert and extrovert, describe how people gain energy, socialize, and approach challenges. So if you are socializing, it's basically you are being social, you are chatting, you are interacting with other people. Sometimes we will say the opposite, say like, oh, I'm being antisocial at the minute, meaning I don't really want to talk with other people. I'd rather be just by myself. But these two terms look at how people interact, socialize, gain energy, and approach challenges.
Right, so these are the two categories. Generally speaking, you could say kind of outgoing and shy might be similar terms, but I think an introvert isn't necessarily shy. A lot of introverts are shy, but it doesn't necessarily mean you are shy. And if you're an extrovert, you're not necessarily a social butterfly either, which we'll talk about in a couple of seconds here. Socializing, of course, just means talking with other people, exchanging ideas, having conversations, etc., etc. Okay, let's move on now to the second part of our lesson. We'll listen first, and then we'll come right back.
Individuals who gain energy from time spent alone or in quiet settings can be described as introverts. Introverts often favor meaningful conversations over small talk and may find social events draining. As a result, they usually enjoy hobbies that require focus or solitude, like reading and drawing. Despite common stereotypes, introverts aren't necessarily shy or antisocial. Many enjoy socializing but like deeper interactions more than large social gatherings. This preference explains why introverts tend to develop a few close friendships instead of many casual ones.
第二部分看到名词 setting， 意思是环境、位置、背景。例如，A quiet setting in the countryside is ideal for a relaxing vacation. 安静的乡村环境是放松度假的理想之地。也可以说 Hawaii should provide a lovely setting for our summer vacation. 夏威夷应该会成为我们夏季度假的美好地点。后面看到名词 stereotype， 这个单字尤其是指错误的刻板印象、成见。例如Gender stereotypes can limit individuals in pursuing careers and interests. 性别刻板印象会限制个人追求职业和兴趣。再一个例子 To say that boys are better at math than girls is a stereotype that just isn't true. 说男孩数学比女孩好是一种刻板印象，这是不正确的。下一个介绍名词 gathering， 指的是聚会、聚集、采集。举例来说We had a family gathering to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. 我们办了一场家族聚会来庆祝奶奶的生日。或是 A gathering was held for all of the students who passed the test. 这个聚会是为所有通过考试的学生而举办的。
Okay, so we're talking about individuals or individual people. These people who gain energy from time spent alone or in quiet settings can be described as introverts. Okay, so if you are the kind of person who enjoys spending time alone, maybe you like to be creative and write songs or read books or whatever, and these will be in quiet settings or in a quiet environment, well, you could be described as an introvert. You like to spend time with yourself or by yourself and learning things that way as opposed to being around a bunch of people.
Yes, and the people who gain energy from this type of situation, those are the people who will feel more refreshed and ready to take on the next day after having time being spent alone and being able to be quiet for a little bit, then they can kind of face the next challenge. And then if we continue on, it says, introverts often favor meaningful conversations over small talk and may find social events draining. And small talk, this is something that pops up a lot. And this is basically the kinds of conversations you would have with somebody that you don't know super well. So they're kind of more like surface level talks. So you might say like, oh, how's the weather? That's always the kind of go-to start of a small talk. Or just basic getting to know you. What's your name? Where are you from? This kind of stuff. That all is considered small talk. Obviously, the opposite of that would be a very meaningful conversation. So getting into more depth about who you are and your thoughts and beliefs and things like that, that might not be so appropriate for somebody you just met. But if you're talking to an old friend, then you can kind of get into a more meaningful conversation.
Right, so you can talk about philosophy or the meaning of life and things like that. Not necessarily so heavy, but these are more meaningful conversations. You're not just talking about trivial things like, which bus should I take to get to the market? Or, oh, isn't the weather so hot these days? Or whatever. That might seem kind of trivial to introverts. They want more meaningful conversations. And small talk, again, is, as you said, just kind of talking about trivial things that aren't really that important. And to introverts, such conversations might be draining. They just drain a lot of energy from you. You just kind of sit there and listen to this. When is this conversation going to get over? They're talking about things that are just so trivial. They're just so meaningless. I'd really rather have a more meaningful conversation with somebody, a more meaningful exchange. But yeah, they can be quite draining. They can be quite exhausting.
Yes, and so it says, as a result, they usually enjoy hobbies that require focus or solitude, like reading and drawing. So as a result of feeling drained to have to be doing so much small talk and being social and all of that, that makes them feel drained. So they would rather find hobbies that require focus or solitude. Solitude just means to be alone. So if you are in solitude, you're by yourself. There's another word that we'll see pop up quite often is solitary. So to be on your own, no one else is around, you're just you. So if you're reading or drawing, you can kind of be just with yourself, with your thoughts, with your drawings, with your readings, and you can kind of take a break from all of these social events that are happening everywhere else and just focus and be quiet.
It sort of implies that maybe artists and writers are introverts because in order to produce a novel or a great painting, you do have to enjoy solitude and spending a lot of time by yourself. Now, here in the next paragraph it says, despite common stereotypes, introverts aren't necessarily shy or antisocial. So these are the stereotypes. If somebody finds out that you're an introvert, they might think, oh, you're so shy. You should learn to talk to people. And you're probably very antisocial. You don't like to go to parties and chat with people. These are stereotypes if you say you're an introvert. They aren't necessarily shy. They might likely be shy, but they aren't necessarily shy. They don't mind talking to people. It's just the kind of people they want to talk to or the kind of situations that they prefer.
Yes, and so we had this word stereotype, and a stereotype is basically a kind of preconceived or prejudged notion or thought on something. Unfortunately, most of the time when we're using this word stereotype, we're talking about something negative. So somebody has heard something negative about maybe a group of people. In this case, the group of people is introverts. And so we've heard that if you're an introvert, then you must be shy. So that would be considered a stereotype. Normally, stereotypes are negative things, so we try to avoid them. We try not to follow them, but they still will pop up from time and time again. And we also had this stereotype that introverts are antisocial. And I mentioned this before when I was looking at the word socialize. Social, interacting, conversing, and doing all of that with other people. And if you are antisocial, you don't want to talk with other people. You don't want to necessarily be around other people. You kind of want some distance and take a break. And so you don't really want to be chatting all the time.
Or you don't want to be in those situations where there are 8 or 10 people chatting about things. You just rather be with 1 or 2 other people. Now, many enjoy socializing, but like deeper interactions more than large social gatherings, which is basically what I just said. A gathering is when people get together, and of course, gatherings are quite popular. Let's get together with like 8 or 10 friends and go hiking or something, or let's go to a coffee shop and have some fun. That would be a gathering. Everybody gets together. And this preference explains why introverts tend to develop a few close friendships instead of many casual ones. So this is a preference, what you prefer, what you would rather like. And indeed, introverts tend to have a couple of close friends, maybe 3 or 4 close friends, but they don't have a lot of casual friends, and they probably don't have a lot of friends on Facebook. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the third part.
In the workplace, introverts often do well in roles requiring concentration, independent thinking, and careful planning. They may prefer working alone or in small teams, in which they can fully process ideas before sharing them. Meanwhile, by relying on their ability to listen and think critically, introverts can also make excellent leaders. However, they sometimes face challenges in group settings if constant collaboration is needed or if they have little time to process information before speaking.
第三部分看到副词 critically 表示批判性的、审慎严谨的对电影、书籍等评论的。例如 The professor looked at the research paper critically, pointing out several weaknesses. 那位教授批判地审视了这份研究论文，指出了几个弱点。也可以说 The novel was critically praised for its unexpected twist ending. 这部小说因其出乎意料的曲折结局而广受好评。最后看到名词 collaboration 表示合作，可以说 Thanks to the collaboration between the two teams, the project was completed successfully. 多亏了2个团队的合作，这个计划才能成功完成。或者 After the failure of their first collaboration, the artists never worked together again. 首次合作即告失败后，那些艺术家未曾再共事过。
All right, so now we are in the last part of our article, and it says, in the workplace. Okay, so we've already looked at kind of more about the introverts and how they interact and all this kind of stuff, but now we need to see how does this apply to kind of the real world? And so we're looking at in the workplace.
Okay, where you work, and introverts often do well in roles requiring concentration, independent thinking, and careful planning. So if you're an introvert, you don't need to feel ashamed for that since most people are extroverts. But if you're working, you do have your contribution. You will be given roles or tasks that require concentration. You need to focus on those things. You need to have some creative ideas and independent thinking. And of course, you think about things carefully. You carefully plan things, while extroverts just blab and don't really seem to have any kind of plan at all.
Yes, and so continuing on, it says they may prefer working alone or in small teams in which they can fully process ideas before sharing them. So a little bit kind of slower paced and a little bit smaller, and that might be knowing it whether you are an introvert or an extrovert might also help for which job you might want to find, and also might help you understand other people, other coworkers, and how they kind of interact with everything. And continuing on, it says, meanwhile, by relying on their ability to listen and think critically, introverts can also make excellent leaders.
Right. So again, this is an advantage to being an introvert. You can rely on your ability to listen and think critically. So yes, indeed, you're not just blabbing away, talking about anything that comes to your mind and not really thinking too deeply on it. You're going to rely on your ability to listen. Okay, to rely on something means to depend on something. You need that thing. And yes, they can listen better than other people can, and they can also think critically. They can analyze the situation. They don't look just at the surface. And so because of this, they can see the scene better than most people, or they can see it more completely. And as a result, they make excellent leaders.
Yes, and so then it says, however, they sometimes face challenges in group settings if constant collaboration is needed or if they have little time to process information before speaking. So they can kind of get into a little bit of stressful situation if they're constantly having to collaborate, which is the verb form of collaboration, which basically just means to work with other people, to work together on something. So in this case, in a workplace, it's your team has to collaborate with another team. So you've got two teams coming together to work on one project or create one idea, one product, or anything like that. And so introverts can kind of have a little bit of a struggle with this if they have constant collaboration and they have little time to kind of process the information, think a little bit, come up with their answer, and then be able to give a response. And if it's too fast-paced, it can be kind of difficult for them.
Yep, extroverts can have very fast-paced conversations. They're just throwing ideas around back and forth. And, of course, introverts may have difficulty keeping up with such situations. So that is an example of a disadvantage to being an introvert. So, again, they need to have that collaboration. They need to continue working with those other people, which may be difficult for introverts, whereas extroverts just kind of take that for granted. I can do that all the time. I'm used to having all sorts of other people to talk to. Maybe to extroverts, it would be kind of weird to actually sit down and talk to somebody one-on-one for a long time. They might think that is boring. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our beloved extroverted Chinese teacher, Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。同学们是 I 人还是 E 人呢？那课文标题它有出现 Introvert 是内向者， Extrovert 是外向者。我们来先拆解一下 Introvert 它的字首字根。 INTRO 这个字首它有 into 或是 within 或是 inward 等等的语义，表示进入里面，在点点点之中，或者是朝内。那在 introvert 这个字当中呢，它的字首 INTRO 表示向内，字根 VERT 表示转动转变，合在一起 introvert 就表示内向者，性格内向的人。那至于 extrovert，它的字首 EXTRO 这部分来自 extra， 在这里表示 outside 向外。那搭配字根 VERT 就变成了 extrovert， 表示外向者，性格外向的人。好，那我们也顺便介绍一下这个字根 VERT 或者是 VERS 这一类字根，它有转动、翻转或变动的意思。那带有这些字根的字大多含有改变原状的语义。我们就来看看几个带有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 invert INVERT， 那它的字首 IN 表示在点点点之中，在点点点之上，字根 VERT 表示翻转。当我们把东西内外或是上下翻转，那它就会前后倒置或上下颠倒。用这个方式也许可以联想到 invert 它有使倒置、使颠倒的意思。第二个补充的是 divert 或是念作 divert， 它的字首 DI 表示分离，从点点点，那么字根 VERT 表示转，我们就可以用转移到旁边去联想到 divert 它有使转向、使改道、转移注意力的意思咯。第三个补充的是 versatile 或是念作 versatile， 它的字根 VERS 表示转， AT 是来自动词字尾 ATE 表示使成为，然后 ILE 是形容词字尾，表示具有某种能力。我们从字根字尾表面的意思来看， versatile 它是指具有转动、变动的能力，那也就是具有多变的能力。从这个语义又再带出了多才多艺的意思，所以 versatile 可以形容多才多艺的或是多用途的。好，课文第三部分有一句提到，凭借着倾听和批判性思考的能力，内向者也可以成为优秀的领导者。文中是用rely on 来表达凭借，那这个片语动词 rely on 或是 rely upon， 它可以表达依靠、依赖、凭借或仰赖等等的语义，后面可以接人或事物来当受词。例如 Many people rely on their phones for everyday tasks， 许多人仰赖手机处理日常事务。再看个例句是 Eric is someone you can rely on，Eric 是个可以信赖依靠的人。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Interact. This job requires someone who can interact with customers in a polite and cheerful manner. Socialize. It's important for children to socialize with others in order to develop good communication skills. Setting. A quiet and peaceful setting can help students focus better on their studies. Stereotype. Educational efforts play a key role in challenging negative stereotypes in society. Gathering. We had a small family gathering last weekend to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. Preference. When it comes to art, everyone has different preferences, so we should respect each other's tastes. Critically. If we read a text critically, then we will be better able to question the author's arguments. Collaboration. The project will not be successful without close collaboration among the team members.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Sam.
See you next time.